Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Lewis Hamilton spotted at Maranello, putting in the hard work to get to grips with the Ferrari SF-25 and turned around his difficult form so far this season. Ferrari do have upgrades on the way, but if they don't work as effectively as their recent pit stops, it is going to be a very long road ahead and potentially a complete write-off this season and full focus to 2026. Big updates on the day as well. George Russell may be getting a new Mercedes deal, but it's certainly not going to happen very soon. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. I swear this is the last time we're going to talk about it, but I just wanted to say a few more words on the Piastri Verstappen thing because everyone keeps talking about it, and thank you guys for indulging my 10-minute rant on the topic yesterday. And I do understand that my idea of kind of like, okay, who's the attacker, who's the defender, also opens up for potential issues as well. I don't think this is ever going to be perfect. Jolyon Palmer's analysis on F1 TV did a good job, I thought, explaining what the stewards were getting at, but I'm not sure I fully agree that rules should actually be like this. But effectively, if you're on the inside of the corner, whether you're the attacker, defender, whatever, they don't really care. What matters is, are you front axle to mirror on the car on the outside? If you are beyond the line where Piastri is, you are entitled to the corner, and you are therefore entitled to completely run your rival out of road. That's the way the rules are. Whether it should be like that is a debate. I am personally inclined to say that if you are behind the car on any level, then, I would prefer that room has to be left. But that's not how it works, and this is the reason why Verstappen was penalised. I did want to, though, comment on some of the discussion around why Max wouldn't have made the corner. So Palmer mentioned this telemetry data, which shows, well, let me explain what the lines are. Just look at the speed line, it's probably more interesting, really. This is speed through the quali lap that Verstappen did to get pole and his lap 1 lap, obviously with the instance at the first corner. So you guys can see that the speed at this point in the lap is stable at top speed going into turn 1, whereas here we are accelerating, and then of course they start to hit the brakes at about this moment. Now during the corner you can see that Verstappen's minimum speed actually goes higher on his opening lap than it was even on his quali lap, and that's full tank, that's medium tyres, that's first lap, and all the other caveats to show that, realistically speaking, and also he clearly gets off the brake at this point as well, he carried in more speed to turn 1 than he did in quali. Now, many people have seen this and said, oh, it's clear, slam dunk, Max was never making the corner. I don't think that is actually a fair assessment. And I also don't think we should be using data like this, in my opinion. Now, okay, it's relevant, it's a nice stat to say, but you can carry more corner speed through a corner than you should on the optimal lap, but it's just going to compromise your exit. But sometimes that's how racing is. Piastri didn't take the optimal line into the first turn, but he took the optimal racing line given that he had a car on his outside. Verstappen carried in more speed to turn 1. It's not like that speed is impossible to carry in, but you would only do so in a racing circumstance. So I just wanted to push back a bit on the idea that, oh, he carried more speed into turn 1. Like, yeah, you can. It's going to compromise your exits. That's how it works. But if the race circumstances apply, then that's when you get a bit of a grey area, right? So I think that idea, again, of using the telemetry in this way, while it may be relevant in this case, is not like a slam dunk, oh, it was clearly a penalty. The other incident that he mentioned, though, which I thought was fascinating really, was to look back at the restarts from 2021, because it was actually the same scenario where Hamilton here got a much better launch than Verstappen did, basically exactly the same as what Piastri did on Verstappen a couple of days ago, but on this occasion, Hamilton was so far ahead. Like, the move was so far complete, and yet still Verstappen absolutely sent it around the outside, went off the track, and the way that Verstappen rejoined here actually compromised Hamilton's exit. So Ocon took the position famously. What an absolute disaster class of a race that was. But this was the start back in 2021, and this was Max turning into the corner. Now look, as far as I'm concerned, Max is not entitled in this situation to any space at all. But if Hamilton wasn't here, would Max have made the corner? Possibly he would have done. I actually think he may well have done if Hamilton wasn't here. So All I'll say is my final comment on this, hopefully. I don't really like ahead at the apex. I don't really like this idea of using telemetry to display that a driver was carrying too much speed, because I think there's other contextual factors in play. And I don't really like the idea of, oh, they wouldn't have made the corner, because it's subjective. You never really know. And even if the move was outrageous, sometimes you may still have made the corner. So, and look, I think my actually very final comment is that this corner should be changed. There needs to be a gravel trap here. I know you guys are mentioning it yesterday, because if there was a gravel trap, this would not be doable, and Max would have to yield in these scenarios. So I think that fundamentally, while there are questions around the way the regulations are presently written, and I think that I understand the way that they currently are written and why that maybe does confer some easier decision making on the stewards than some of the other subjective things that we've mentioned over the last couple of minutes, this corner is a problem, and every time Max has come here, he has, abused the design of the corner, I would say. And we're talking about this more than other instances just because I think the corner allows for problems like this to occur. And if this was all gravel, then Max would be forced to yield. So that's something to think about maybe going forwards. We may not be at Jeddah for too many more years. There's talk, of course, about Qadiyah coming in, but I'm pretty sure the Saudis would want 2 Grand Prix. If they're going to look at America and say they've got 3 in Texas, Miami, and Las Vegas, they're going to say, well, look, why can't we have at least 2 in Jeddah and in that new circuit at Qadiyah, which, goes up in the sky. I'm sure you've seen that one over the last few months. So maybe Jeddah stays, maybe it goes, but it's probably going to be on the calendar for at least a few more years to come. Another big update on the day was coming out of, General Motors. The power unit manufacturer has been confirmed that it's going to be Cadillac, right, for 2029, though. That's the key date. So until 2029, they will use the new Cadillac General Motors entry. They will use Ferrari power. What's interesting about this is that I doubt they are going to make the engine that is in the current regs for 1 year, right? Because the current rumor is the current regulations may live for 26, 27, 28, and probably 29 with the current power unit as they are being defined right now, the 50-50 electrical split. We'll get to that in a second because that may well change. But those turbo hybrid era engines, but the new generation of them, the new iteration, they will likely last until 2029 or 2030. That's the current rumor. Will General Motors, let's say the power units are changing in 2030 to a fully sustainable V10 engine, which is maybe ambitious, but who knows? Are they going to make this very complicated hybrid engine for 1 year? Unlikely. So I think they're thinking the engine regs are going to change in 29. We'll use Ferrari power for all of this next few years period, and then we'll switch to our own power when we're talking about V8s again, which maybe is the way that we will go. But the last few days have been very controversial on the new engines for 2026. Toto Wolff is adamant that nothing should change at all and it's perfectly fine the way that it is. So I think that tells you everything you need to know about the relative strength of this Mercedes engine for 2026. But there's going to be a meeting tomorrow where all of the F1 teams and manufacturers are going to discuss whether a move away from 50% ICE, 50% electrical is the way to go. Now this causes loads of issues, this 50-50 split. Mainly because if you've got 50% of your energy coming from an electrical engine, how do you get the energy for that engine? You're not burning fuel. You're recovering power through the MGU-K when you brake, and the engine itself is driving energy to the battery, but you're going to lose so much power over the course of a Grand Prix lap and even a qualifying lap as well. There is an argument to say that maybe the 50-50 split was never really going to work, but this is the latest suggestion, because of course they're not going to change the engines. The engines are what they are, but what they're going to play with potentially is changing how much horsepower is able to be used in certain conditions. So currently in 2025 there is about 900 horsepower, 551 kilowatts, or let's just use the horsepower numbers, currently comes from the ICE, and 161 horsepower roughly comes from the electrical component. Next year that's going to be 50-50, and it will likely stay 50-50 during qualifying sessions. But in a race distance, if 50% of the power is coming from the electrical component, that energy will run out very quickly. So the teams therefore need to decide, where are they going to deploy, where are they going to recover. And if you deploy all of that energy in one go, the 350 kilowatts, it will last you about 7 seconds in a straight line. So, not great, is it really? Which would mean that for some of the lap, you're running at effectively 1,000 horsepower, and for half of the lap, you're running at half the horsepower. Like, it's not really looking very good. So, they've come up with various rules on, well, okay, you can deploy, but you can't deploy everything at once, and you have to save it over a lap, and you can only deploy a certain amount at a time over the course of a lap, and it just creates so much complication, which frankly should not be necessary, in my opinion, in the sport. However, some teams are proposing, Red Bull certainly included, that a move to only 200 kilowatts, or roughly 270 horsepower, from the electrical battery during the Grand Prix would be a better compromise. Yes, overall power would go down, but overall performance of the cars might not change all that much. It would mean that there was more power, because the power's still there in the battery, you know, the energy's still there ready to be deployed. It's just you can't deploy as much of it at one particular time, and therefore the power will last longer, and it will make the racing experience for the drivers and for the fans probably slightly better, because, you know, we are going to get, especially if the first scenario happens, some crazy circumstances this year when you've got one car with 1,000 horsepower coming up behind another car with 500, because one's used its energy and one hasn't. And, you know, that could be a recipe for disaster, or it could be entertaining and useful for overtaking. I don't know. Either way, it's going to be interesting. Potentially terrible, but certainly interesting. This is the proposal. Mercedes say, what are you talking about? We are not doing that. This is a joke. Why would you even propose this? Which I think tells you everything about the fact that they're very confident in their engine for next year. Other manufacturers, however, may agree that this makes more sense. There does need to be a majority, potentially even a supermajority, as in there are 5 manufacturers. Mercedes are obviously going to disagree. If anyone else disagrees, probably this is not going to be happening. But the fact that we're only a few months away, really, from the start of these regulations, and we're having discussions like this, shows that probably these aren't the best regulations, but nobody will be shocked by that revelation. Let's talk about the current state of Formula 1, because, as I said before, and may well have to say again, enjoy this year while it lasts, because it's not been great in terms of racing, but at least we've got a championship battle between a couple of different teams. Max is still in the hunt. Mercedes aren't a million miles away. Ferrari kind of are, but we'll get to them in a second. At least they've got a podium on the board. The gap between quali lap times is mega close. So, look, 2025 is not necessarily living up to the billing as being the greatest ever season, but it could be better than next year. These are the pole times, by the way, or the pole differentials so far. Remarkable. Like, if you average these out, that'd be crazy. The deltas that we've had, obviously a couple of these coming from Max Verstappen in some of the closest possible fashions. And Fred Vasseur said it right, this year is a qualifying championship, and, well, certainly qualifying is one to watch this season on the evidence that we have seen so far. And if the evidence continues that McLaren have the fastest car, Max Verstappen may have to consider his future. We're talking Mercedes, we're talking Ferrari. Don't know about that. We're talking Aston Martin. We're talking sabbatical. Take some time off, look after the kids, then come back in 2027 and choose the best team. That is an option as well. But Red Bull, if they turn it around quickly this year, they may still be able to hold on to Max Verstappen. At the end of the day, even if Max's contract clause, if he's below third in the Drivers' Championship, which is the current rumour, is true, would he leave anyway? Or even if that doesn't come true, he could still potentially depart if he really wanted to and didn't want to drive for them anymore and felt like another team in 2026 was better positioned, because let's be real, Red Bull are waxing lyrical about changing these regulations, as we have just discussed. Mercedes say no, absolutely not. So, you know, there's a feeling that joining a Mercedes power team is the way to go for next year. And as good as Red Bull may become at the end of this season, maybe they really turn it around. Maybe their upgrades this year actually work. Red Bull are actually quite convinced that they're going to bring loads of upgrades this season with the intention to give Max the chance to win the title. It may not work, but there's a feeling that Red Bull are not, let's say, avoiding the possibility of sacrificing 2026 to give Max the best possible chance this year. They have big upgrade package in Imola. They have front wing technical directive coming in, potentially slowing down McLaren in Spain. It's going to be a critical triple header across Imola, Monaco, Spain from the 16th of May to the end of May to determine the way the rest of the season is going to run. Before we get to Ferrari, just a quick update on Russell. Yesterday we discussed how Horner and Russell apparently held some sort of informal discussions about their potential future maybe working together. And Toto Wolff now says this: we have the summer window, we have no reason to challenge or question anything as it is now. I'm super happy with the lineup we have. I could not wish for anything better. So, like, is this just good statesmanship here from Toto Wolff, being a politician about it and saying, yeah, there's no way we could have a better lineup. I could not wish for anything better. Although I'm sure that Toto goes to sleep at night dreaming about Max Verstappen in a Mercedes race suit. So we'll see. But the point is that despite the rumours that George is getting a new deal worth $30 million a year, that deal is certainly not happening yet. And the deal is likely to not happen at all until roughly the summer break, at which point maybe the deal gets done. But the summer break is quite a while away, right? You're talking, 14 races into the season, something like that. 12, 14 races in. It's quite a while away, right? We're talking August. That's plenty of months for the situation to change at Red Bull and potentially Verstappen to become available. Let's talk Ferrari though, because definitely one of the big topics in F1 right now is Hamilton's struggles at that team so far. And look, how much of it is his fault, as it were? He's joining a team where Charles Leclerc is the incumbent. The car is not great. It seems challenging in many areas. Even for Leclerc, that's certainly proven true so far this year. Hamilton's had his moments. They've been, at least in recent weeks, relatively few and far between. But of course, the China sprint will live long in the memory. The qualifying session there, and of course, the race victory conversion that he turned that into, the sprint victory that he turned that into on the Saturday. Yes, he's been struggling the last couple of rounds, and he needs to get on top of this, absolutely. Otherwise, Ferrari are not going to be in position to challenge Mercedes for third in the Constructors' Championship, or Red Bull as well, of course, are not that far off the conversation too, because Max has scored a fair few points, as always, on his own this season. Yuki's scored a couple, but it is once again the Max Verstappen show at that team. So it's important that Hamilton turns his form around, but frankly, it's not like Ferrari are competing for the championships this year. And that's why there are serious questions on what Ferrari should do. I mean, Hamilton at his moment, he actually helped out the team dramatically by overtaking Lando Norris on a couple of occasions using the DRS games. That cost Lando a substantial amount of race time that at the end of the Grand Prix would probably have been enough to get Charles Leclerc. This, though, was Lewis Hamilton today at the Maranello factory for Ferrari, because he mentioned after Saudi that he was obviously way off the pace, he was struggling, he was having a hard time, and there were plans that he was intending to cancel so that he could really lock in, basically, and figure out what he was going to do to figure out the situation, because problems for him handling the balance of the car, the engine braking that it seems like was necessary to get the best out of it, and I'm sure that there's lots of studying for Hamilton to do on, okay, how is Leclerc approaching this, how is Leclerc approaching that, and time in the simulator to try and get on top of how he can get to the next level and get back to where he wants to be as a driver right now. Because the other day it certainly felt like his confidence after Saudi was absolutely nowhere, and, well, he needs to turn it around fast. Whether he's got to talk to Angela Cullen or like a therapist or something to snap himself out of the mental headspace, but it seemed like after Saudi it was a real challenge for him, in the same way that sometimes you see with the likes of Lando Norris. The one positive for Hamilton and Ferrari is that their pit stops have been insanely rapid, and it's funny that Ferrari have finally figured out their operations in a season where their car just isn't very good. I mean, their car unfortunately isn't good enough. They need upgrades, we'll discuss just in a couple of seconds, but they've been killing it. In all 5 races, Ferrari have had the fastest pit stops. It makes a massive change for Hamilton after what he's dealt with at Mercedes over the last couple of years. And Red Bull have no doubt fallen off to some degree since Jonathan Wheatley's gone. Whether that really makes a difference, I don't know. I think even a couple of rounds ago they were using one of their reserve crews Red Bull, which is maybe one of the reasons. But yeah, they've certainly not been on fire, and it may not affect Red Bull and Verstappen's championship hopes, but it certainly may be relevant. Unfortunately for Ferrari, yeah, they might have the best pit stops now, but it's not enough to win you a Grand Prix, because that second you gain in the pits, you lose very quickly if your car's terrible. And it's not terrible, but it's obviously problematic, right? And I think that they realize this in China, and maybe even in Australia, that their car is very sensitive to ride height. If they have it at the wrong ride height, their performance disappears, and they're very limited in terms of their operating range. Get it wrong, you're going to be nowhere, your drivers are going to have no confidence, and certainly around a circuit like Jeddah, that is a big deal. So upgrades are on the way to intends to widen the operating window of the car. Whether this will work, we'll see, but they have realized that yes, there are critical mechanical issues here. I think it was very evident after China that that was true, right? After they got disqualified with Hamilton in China, they tried to run the car at a certain ride height and it wasn't going to work, right? They didn't deliver the required performance they were looking for anyway, and they got disqualified. So that was the smoking gun, really, that Ferrari's car was massively problematic, and still it continues in that vein. The issue, of course, for Ferrari being that, let's say they fix this, let's say they solve it, let's say they resolve the issue, let's say in Imola, that's the target date, they're bringing their major upgrade. Is it going to be too little too late? Are they too far behind in the championship already? The argument is they probably are. Ferrari currently have 78 points. They're 11 points behind Red Bull Racing, McLaren have 188. So Ferrari's deficit is 110 points already with 5 rounds into the year, and McLaren ain't going anywhere, right? So the championship on that side is over. Realistically speaking, I mean, look, who knows? But given it's not like Ferrari are going to be able to make a McLaren level step in Miami, right, or Imola, like it's just not going to happen. I don't think that's really possible given we're reaching the ceiling of these regulations, and it's doubtful that the technical directive is going to make McLaren go from being the best car to the 5th best car. And in the drivers, Charles Leclerc is already 52 points back, so there obviously does come a time where the team has to decide what they're going to do about it, right? Like whether they are going to still commit to 2025 or whether their full focus is going to turn to next season instead. So very much interested to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.